Our first speaker, always to kick off our conference in recent years, has been Congressman Kevin Brady. He's a senior member of the House Ways and Means Committee, a former chairman of the Trade Subcommittee, and currently chairs the Health Subcommittee, which is a crucial position for the Houston region, which boasts the largest medical center in the world. He also leads the leadership post of Deputy Whip for Republican Majority. And prior to his election to Congressman, Kevin Brady was a Chamber of Commerce executive. Many of you know that. He did that for 18 years, 10 of which was right here at this chamber. He served 6 years in the Texas House of Representatives, representing this area. And a distinguishing fact of Congressman Brady is that although he works in Washington, D.C. every day of the week, he and his wife Kathy and 2 sons still live right here in the Woodlands, and he commutes every weekend. Please help me welcome Congressman Kevin Brady.
Nell, thank you very much for the introduction. Thanks for the great job that you've done throughout the years for our community in moderating this conference as well. This is one of the best events of the year for the Chamber and for our community. I'm always amazed at what we learn about the future of our economically, for our community, for our families. I want to thank Linda. I think a more appropriate person, given the subject, the energy to grow, the innovative work that Lone Star and you are doing for our energy workforce. I can't think of a more appropriate person. Join me in thanking Linda for sharing. I'm excited to hear Bob Davis today. It's exciting to have ExxonMobil here, becoming a new neighbor, corporate neighbor of our region. And Bob, what you'll find is that you're joining a lot of awfully good corporate neighbors. Some of them who are on the agenda today to look around this room really is remarkable, the companies that you'll be keeping here. When you look at the economy, government is a risk factor. A big one. It didn't always used to be that way, but it very much is today. So when Washington starts talking about an issue, it's wise for businesses, large and small, to pay attention. Today, as you know, from the White House and from others in Washington, you hear an awful lot in the State of the Union and campaign speeches about income inequality. And the narrative goes that some in America have too much, and most have too little. But too much of America's wealth is held by just a very few. And the narrative goes, government needs to do something to equalize income. Well, most of us would say, I don't really trust the government to equalize my income. What is their idea of equal? And if we can't trust them to run a website, can we trust them with our dreams or our children's? In common sense, my guess is in this room we would say, we're not all blessed with equal talents. But in America, you ought to have an equal chance to climb the ladder of success. And most likely, you'll be driven by our personal decisions and initiative, not so much by government. But not all people think as we do. And so let's talk about income inequality. Let's know the facts. And for those of you who think you're going to see a rapid-fire series of slides, like I normally do, I won't. The topic doesn't need it, and I'm trying to wean myself from that addiction. So, first thing you need to know is economists disagree violently about this issue. Well, at least as violently as economists can disagree. You know, some believe that when you look only at income, what the very wealthy make and what the very poor make, there's been dramatic change in income inequality over the years. In fact, those are the statistics you'll often hear from advocates of this issue. Other economists take a more real-life view of this. They know that taxes lower income for many. They know that government programs, housing, food, Medicaid, actually stretch the income of those on the bottom of several rungs. So when they take more of a real-life examination of income equality, they say there's been a modest change over the decades, about what other countries in the world are experiencing. And yet other economists say, look, let's cut to the chase. It's really what you can buy that determines your standard of living. So when they look at consumption, what proportion of things are bought by the very wealthy and those by the very poor, they found over 4 decades, zero change. the proportion is exactly as it was nearly 40 years ago. Do some Americans earn more than others? Absolutely. I can't fathom how Miley Cyrus is worth $150 million. I can't fathom how actor Johnny Depp, when he finishes the Pirates of the Caribbean series, will have made nearly $500 million. $500 million. This is Jack Sparrow, not Jack Nicholas, not Jack Welch, Jack Sparrow. But I think we can all appreciate a Mark Zuckerberg who becomes the world's largest billionaire, launching Facebook from his college dorm room. And especially in this room, I think we can appreciate how the son of a Greek immigrant, George Mitchell, and whose vision many of us live and work, rose to wealth and rose to become what the economist says few business people have done as much to change the world. The truth is, in America, for all its trouble, we live in a remarkable country. And the ladder to success is very much in place. Think about this. 9 out of 10 children born to the poorest families will earn more than their parents do. In absolute terms, by every measure, 9 out of 10 will earn more. The children of the poorest are more likely to climb that ladder to success than the children of the wealthy will stay on the rung they're at. Because that ladder goes both ways. And oftentimes it will go both ways in your lifetime as well. So, if every American turn to the person to the right and the person to the left, one of the three now lives an upper middle class lifestyle. Excuse me. 1 out of 3. That's double what it was just a few decades ago. It's double what it was the year Nolan Ryan started his major league debut with the New York Mets. Nolan Ryan has nothing to do with this talk. I'm just so excited he's coming to Houston. And I think what's most astounding, to really look at the facts, you go to high school and look at the first 10 young people. So you go to the mall, look at the first 10 young people you meet. Out of those 10, 2 of those 10, sometime in their lifetime, will rise to become the top 2% earners in America. 2 out of 10 will rise to become among the wealthier in America. They will go from mac and cheese to a McMansion. From attending church to helping build the fund for the new church sometime in their lifetime. And that's why we're so remarkably mobile as a nation. That's why when you look at the top 400 taxpayers every year in America, nearly half of them are brand new, have never been there before. The ladder to success, economic mobility in our country is still very much in place. I think the real challenge is that too many people no longer believe that ladder of success is available to them. They really don't believe it's there. They've lost hope that if they work hard and play by the rules, tomorrow will be better than today. And in some ways, who can blame them? The last number of years have been rough. In the recession itself, we have the weakest, perhaps the most disappointing economic recovery in half a century. Millions of people can't find a full-time job. Millions more have simply given up hope and just don't look anymore. And even since the recovery began, more than 40 years ago, since the recovery began, there are fewer adults working today than there were 4 years ago. In some ways, while Texas is doing great, in some ways as a country we're actually losing ground in the economy. We hope that won't continue. Again, Texas is doing great, but a lot of families are struggling. They haven't benefited from what government has decided they can do to help. The stimulus hasn't got people back to work the way it's promised. The Federal Reserve has pumped trillions of dollars into Wall Street, who's doing great, but not so much for Main Street, certainly not so much for middle class. College costs have soared, thankfully. We have Lone Star College and affordability there. Our 4-year institutions in our region, from Sand, University of Houston, and others, we're in a better position. Energy costs are starting to come down, but they doubled from what they were 4.5 years ago. And for all this discussion about the Affordable Care Act, there's no question some Americans are being helped, but many more are being hurt. They're being forced out of plans that they liked and wanted to keep. And and the planes that are more expensive with smaller networks that they didn't want. And the uncertainty for businesses, and you can tell me this as job creators, is real. You know it full well. At the State of the Union, my guest was Amy Milstead, the chairman of the board of the chamber. A small businesswoman, family-owned, successful family-owned business, and she had a great story to tell about the impact of this new health care law to our national press. I was proud. Some people had Hannity, I had Amy. I won in that deal. There's no question. And out of fairness, the president shouldn't shoulder all the blame for this. This started before that, but he should accept some responsibility for this. And I think as we have this discussion as a country, we ought to think about why so many Americans believe the ladder of success is no longer within their reach. And I think the president, anyone talking about this, ought to be careful that we don't divide America. That we don't pit one American against each other based on their success. That we don't fuel resentment or jealousy, because the truth is, America is built on competition, on risk, on hard work. That's what made us the strongest economy in the world, and done the right way, will keep us the strongest economy in the world through the 21st century. So, is there a proven recipe for climbing that ladder of success? Well, there is. Economic study after economic study after economic study shows us exactly how you do it. It's education, work, and marriage. And if you really want a kicker, have children within the marriage. Education, work, and marriage. And for a bonus, children within the marriage. And it works almost every time. In education, obviously in America, college or professional degree is just such a strong qualification, because the biggest gap over the last number of decades isn't on income, it's on skills. We got a huge skills gap in America, and everything we do to close that actually closes the difference between the very wealthy and the very poor. And even without a professional degree, a trade degree, a skills degree, because almost 80% of our economy is service-based. And those service jobs average about $60,000 per person. So it's starting in that middle class area. So education, college degree, by the way, no more important in America, or skill of some type is absolutely critical. And with education, with work, with marriage, the poorest will rise. Those born to the poorest families will rise to middle class or above. With education, work, and marriage, their chances of staying in poverty are almost zero. And without those three, their chances of escaping poverty are almost zero. Work is critically important, especially that first job. Economists tell us how important that is. That's why I'm worried the effort, the push to raise the minimum wage again to $10.10 is, I think, wrong hit. When you walk into a small business along Broken's Mill or up on 105 here in Conroe and say, we're the government, we need you to pay $5,000 more per worker every year. We don't have more sales for you, we don't have more customers for you, you just need to do it. Well, for a small business with 10 workers, that's $50,000 a year. That may well have been the profit that they made that year. And what's the response? First, they start taking from themselves. They'll pay themselves less. They'll start cutting hours. They'll start cutting workers. And at the very least, they'll hesitate to hire new ones. And oftentimes, the person who most wants that first job, that most wants minimum wage, is young. Starting out in that first job. Rich families from poor families, everyone's got to have that first job. And so when you raise the price of that labor, the people get hurt the most are the people who need that first job the most. The first job is important. I like to tell the story of Arthur Brooks. He's the head of the American Enterprise Institute. Very bright young guy in Washington, D.C. Really devoted to that institute, devoted to free enterprise. He tells the story about this impromptu plane conversation. He travels a lot. He was telling a group that his seatmate turned out to be the chief financial officer of a company that owned 450 fast food restaurants. I think they were Burger Kings. And in the conversation with his seatmate, he sort of teased him by saying, how do you feel about creating so many dead-end jobs? Well, his seatmate got a little red-faced. And what the man told him was, they don't create any dead-end jobs. He said if workers started in their restaurant and did little more than show up on time and simply work, they'd be a shift manager within 3 months. And within 2 years, they'd be a store manager making more than $100,000 a year. He said he started flipping burgers in that very chain. The CEO started by sweeping floors and flipping burgers in that same, as had almost everyone in the executive suite. And the point he made to Arthur Brooks was, there are no dead-end jobs, just dead-end attitudes. No dead-end jobs. And I look around our community, and it is true here as well. Those first jobs are so important. Robert Marley in the wood forest, he mowed lawns, $1.50 an hour. I actually had a typo that says $150 an hour. And I thought, yeah, Robert probably got that. Al Walker, CEO of Anadarko, he cleaned the golf carts and clubs. Tim Wellness, he threw newspapers for the Houston Chronicle, the Houston Press. And he told me he discovered he did manual labor for a freight company. And as he tells me, I discovered skinny people shouldn't do manual labor. Phil Ashman, CEO of CB&I, that built their new building, he delivered newspapers too. He was excellent at it. He bought out the other carriers in the area so he could make more money. Mike Minarovich, CEO of Arena Energy here on Research Force, he planted Christmas trees for what he said was a cranky old man. Steve Sanders, Memorial Herman, he sacked groceries, and he was a file clerk before he headed to the Army. And Debbie Sukin, St. Luke's, she worked at age 16 at a neighborhood pharmacy. Well, my guess is this is the story of almost everyone in this room. Almost everyone in this room. Most of us start out in what was called, or what could be described as a dead-end job. But the experiences we got in that job all contributed to our success. Success is what, in fact, helped us become what we became. Like you, my first job, I threw newspapers for my uncle's paper. And I was a maintenance man, assistant maintenance man, at a campground that our family, after my dad died, our family was putting money together to build a campground. So I cleaned bathrooms and mowed lawns and picked up, made garden runs and shit. And like many of you in college, think about all the jobs you held in college. Where you took any job that paid the most, whatever it was. For me, I laid curb and gutter in a construction company, was a meat packer, bent sheet metal to build air compressors, was a waiter, a bartender, and the job I'm not supposed to tell you about, I was a DJ in a disco. No, seriously, with the lights on down below, you know what I mean? You go, like staying alive, staying dead. And I did that so I could work at nights as a DJ and look for a job during the day, and that's how I landed my first Chamber of Commerce job. Unfortunately, since then, I've pursued a disreputable profession. And I guess if there's the two key points I want to make today, if there's nothing else to remember, one, there are no dead-end jobs, absolutely not. And secondly, to climb that ladder to success, education, work, marriage, those are personal decisions. Those aren't government decisions. Those are personal decisions. Yeah, government plays a role in education, obviously, and the quality of it, but the decision to go to school, to study hard, to continue, it is all personal. It all comes from each and every one of us. In government, I think with the best intentions, oftentimes it makes it harder. And think about this. When you raise the minimum wage, you actually remove one of those rungs of the ladder, especially for the poor, especially for minority kids. When you extend unemployment for 2 years, when every economist tells you if someone's out of the workplace for 2 years, their skills go down, they change their lifestyle, the chances of getting back are almost zero. But the government paid benefits to that degree. We have, too often, in the best intentions, poverty traps. For example, in most states in America, welfare pays more than the minimum wage. In 13 states, it pays more than $15 an hour. Unmarried moms in the poorest communities in America knows that if they get married, they lose some of their benefits. benefits. And in the tax code and the Affordable Care Act, the harder you work, the more you earn, the less help you get. And people are smart. And so they know where they're at, and they'll stay in that term. So really the question is, how should the federal government act to help us restore America's belief and opportunity in that ladder to success? Well, we might heed the advice of Abraham Lincoln, maybe the greatest equalizer of anyone in the White House. And I love this quote from him. It was from his message to Congress in July of 1861. He talked about what he thought the proper role of government was in promoting economic opportunity. He said, to elevate the condition of man, to lift artificial weights from all shoulders, to clear the paths of laudable pursuit for all, to afford all an unfettered start and a fair chance in the race of life. An unfettered start and a fair chance in the race of life. Well, that's true today. That's exactly true today. We ought to do more to lift the artificial weights off of families. We ought to get Washington out of the way so that every American has that unfettered start and that fair chance in the race of life. Good examples is in the tax code that often holds people down. Another example is in energy work. We unleash the power of energy. We're looking at 1 million more new jobs in America, good paying jobs for the unskilled to the very highly skilled. And so I think that what all that means is that we ought to focus more on growing the economy rather than government. We ought to focus more on Main Street rather than Wall Street. And maybe most importantly, we ought to celebrate hard work. We ought to reward hard work. I mean really reward hard work. That's what builds America. That's what our economy needs. And that's going to allow families, whatever condition they're born in, to climb that ladder to success. With that, thank you.